about the letter.
Meghan is punishing him for the rest of his life. And what I find so hypocritical is that Meghan is punishing Thomas for doing exactly the same thing that she has done. She has spoken out publicly. We know far more about her life through her own words than anything Thomas Markle has ever said about her. All he's ever said is that he loves her. She's a great daughter. There's beautiful pictures of her as a child. He supported her. She lived with him during junior school and senior school. He paid for her to go to university. And now this one last dying wish to see his daughter, to reconcile. Because after he dies, it will be too late.
So what do you think
Meghan
the chances are that Meghan would see that and think, I need to change my mind?
I think anyone who has been in this situation, who understands the power dynamics, the emotional abuse, can say that I fully support her in her decision. She owes nothing to her father, but she owes everything to herself and her children.
All right, now that you've heard that, let's talk. Because what you just watched was not a balanced discussion, it was not empathy, and it definitely wasn't understanding. That was emotional guilt-tripping, dressed up as concern, served on a breakfast show that seems permanently confused about the difference between love and access. Good Morning Britain once again decided that the best way to start the day was by lecturing a woman about her own family trauma confidently, loudly, and without a single ounce of lived experience in the room. And the confidence is what always gets me. The way people who have never been betrayed by a parent speak with such authority about what reconciliation should look like. Because let me tell you something. If you've lived it, you don't talk like that. You don't reduce it to sentimentality. You don't weaponize childhood photos and tuition fees. And you definitely don't sit on a sofa and accuse someone of punishment for choosing peace. What you just saw was a masterclass in misunderstanding power dynamics, emotional manipulation, and boundaries. A refusal to accept that sometimes distance is not cruelty, it's survival. And let's be very clear right from the start. Meghan Sussex did not wake up one morning and decide to punish anyone. That narrative is lazy, insulting, and deeply disconnected from reality. No one cuts off a parent lightly. No one walks away without years of trying, hoping, explaining, forgiving, and getting burned again. What that panel centered was the comfort of a grown man who repeatedly sold out his daughter while completely dismissing the woman who lived through it. And that's exactly why we need to unpack this properly. Because the moment someone says she's punishing him, I already know they don't understand what boundaries are. Punishment is intentional harm. Boundaries are protection. And confusing the two is how people stay trapped in unhealthy relationships for decades. The idea that an adult child owes permanent access to a parent regardless of behavior is one of the most toxic beliefs society refuses to let go of, especially when that child is a woman, especially when that woman is expected to be forgiving, gracious, and endlessly understanding, even when she's the one being harmed. Then comes the false equivalence that always gets trotted out, the claim that Meghan speaking publicly about her own life is somehow the same as what her father has done. No, absolutely not. Meghan Sussex speaking about her experiences in controlled environments on her own terms is not the same as a parent collaborating with hostile media, leaking private correspondence, staging moments for attention, and repeatedly violating boundaries after being asked to stop. That comparison only works if you pretend context doesn't matter. And context is everything. One is agency. The other is exploitation. One is reclaiming your story. The other is selling someone else's. And the UK media pretending they can't tell the difference is hilarious, considering they make a living off exploiting private lives while condemning others for speaking. Then we get the emotional manipulation starter pack, the greatest hits, the script they never change. He loves her. She was a good daughter. There are happy childhood pictures. He paid for her education. And every time I hear this, I ask the same question. So what? That's called parenting. That's not a lifelong contract. That's not a debt Meghan has to keep repaying with access, silence, and emotional labor. Doing what you're supposed to do as a parent does not entitle you to betray your child later and still demand closeness. Love is not proven by words and photos, it's proven by respect. And respect means honoring boundaries even when you don't like them. The obsession with childhood photos always cracks me up because it tells me exactly how shallow the argument is, as if smiling in a picture 30 years ago cancels out years of betrayal, as if no abusive or toxic relationship has ever had good moments. Of course there were good times. There usually are. That's how people stay. That's how bonds form. That's how manipulation works. Good memories do not invalidate present harm. And then, right on cue, comes the emotional blackmail wrapped in sentiment, the last wish, the mortality card, the it will be too late narrative. Let me say this clearly. If reconciliation was genuinely the goal, it would not be pursued through tabloids and television interviews. It would not involve public pressure campaigns. It would not be framed as something Meghan must do for the comfort of strangers watching at home. Private repair happens privately. Dragging illness, age, or mortality into the public arena is not vulnerability, it's leverage. And it's especially cruel when aimed at someone who has already been emotionally worn down by years of boundary violations. And this is why Ateh Jewel's contribution mattered so much, because she brought something into that studio that the others clearly lacked: lived experience. She spoke about power dynamics, about emotional abuse, about the kind of manipulation that doesn't look dramatic enough for television, but leaves deep scars anyway. People who have been through it recognize it immediately. People who haven't often dismiss it, because acknowledging it would mean admitting that family doesn't always mean safe. And when Ateh said Meghan's decision mattered, you could feel the discomfort, because support disrupts the narrative. It challenges the idea that estrangement is cruelty instead of consequence. Her statement that Meghan owes nothing to her father, but owes everything to herself and her children, is the most important line in this entire conversation. Because Meghan Sussex is not just a daughter, she is a mother. And once you become a parent, your responsibility changes. Your tolerance for dysfunction shrinks. Your willingness to expose your children to unstable dynamics disappears. At some point, you stop asking, how do I keep everyone happy? And you start asking, what am I teaching my kids by allowing this? And if someone, even a parent, repeatedly chooses attention over accountability, publicity over privacy, and sympathy over change, then distance is not revenge. It's wisdom. What so many commentators refuse to acknowledge is that reconciliation requires effort from both sides. It requires change, accountability, and respect. Not interviews, not guilt, not public pressure. And Thomas Markle has shown, consistently, that attention matters more to him than repair. Every time there's an opportunity to step back, he steps forward into the media. Every time there's a chance for quiet reflection, he chooses another interview. That's not someone seeking reconciliation, that's someone seeking relevance. And let's talk about the double standards, because they're impossible to ignore. When Meghan does protect her peace, suddenly it's punishment, cruelty, heartlessness. Same behavior, different judgment. And we all know why. A woman setting boundaries is still deeply uncomfortable for a lot of people, especially when she refuses to explain herself over and over again, especially when she doesn't perform forgiveness on demand. The truth is, Meghan didn't fail to be a good daughter. She refused to be a silent one. She refused to absorb harm gracefully. She refused to sacrifice her peace to satisfy public opinion. And for some people, that will always be unforgivable. Because they don't want healing, they want compliance. They want women to endure quietly and smile through it. They want access without accountability. And Meghan Sussex said no. So shout out to Ateh Jewel for bringing reality into a conversation drowning in sentimentality, for reminding viewers that emotional abuse exists even when it doesn't look dramatic, and for validating a decision that so many people make quietly, without applause, because it's necessary. As for the rest of the panel, maybe before lecturing someone on forgiveness, learn what betrayal actually does to a person, because until you've lived it, your opinions are just noise. Now, family, I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to set boundaries with someone you loved? Have you ever been told you were cruel for protecting yourself? Let's talk in the comments. If you found this breakdown meaningful, make sure you like, subscribe, and share. We're growing every day, and I appreciate every single one of you who shows up with empathy critical thinking, and open minds. Protect your peace, trust your instincts, and remember, boundaries are not punishment. They are self-respect. I'll see you in the next one. Happy holidays!